has just been such a blessing to be a part of and to see the kind of work that so many of you are doing locally and in the state, and for those of you who are working around the country to change the way that the criminal justice system works is just, it's a real gift. So thank you all. I hope you enjoyed this morning. I know that there are many, many good things happening right here in Harris County, and we love nothing more at the Texas Public Policy Foundation than finding good models, making them better, and then exporting it to the world. So we are really excited about the opportunities and what so many of you in this room have been such a big part of. I was reading, and sort of tangentially related, although at a much higher level, a great op-ed just yesterday or the day before in the Washington Post that said that in America, we have 5% of the world's population, but we have 25% of the world's incarcerated population. And that is a number that is not something we should be proud of, and one that we will all continue to work for as we work for a better Houston, a better Texas, and a better America. So thank you again. I introduced Mark this morning. He'll be our master of ceremonies, but I'll do it one more time. There's no one more dedicated, more passionate, more energetic, who thinks more about this issue than our Mark Levin, the Center for Effective Justice Director at the Texas Public Policy Foundation. Of course, I've forgiven him long ago for his being a graduate of the University of Texas, both undergrad and law school, but you know, we've moved on from that little piece of problem. But Mark is an extraordinary mind, he's an extraordinary intellect, he's an extraordinary patriot for all that is good, and he deserves so very much credit. I thank him and the great staff at TPPF. Please help me welcome Mark Levin.
Thanks so much, Brooke. But yeah, as far as the acting thing, I will help you root for Johnny this weekend, so forgive me. But anyway, I am pleased to introduce our introductory speaker here today, Judge Oscar Hale, who is a district judge in the 406th District Court in Laredo, Texas. And he's created a drug court there, and Let's All Rise to the Challenge program to provide early intervention for teenagers who are at risk of developing a drug addiction. He has also allowed cameras in the courtroom to make his court fully transparent. So he's had a great record of treating chemical dependency, both through judicial oversight and medication-assisted treatment. So please join me in welcoming Judge Oscar Hale.
Good afternoon. I am truly honored and humbled to be here with you today. When I received an invitation from Mark and the Texas Foundation on Public Policy, I was actually thought about, well, why they consider me an expert in drug courts. I guess I've been doing it for 5 years, and maybe that qualifies, but I certainly don't consider myself an expert, but I hope that some of the things that I have to share with you today will help you in providing services to your community like it has our community in Laredo. And certainly a little intimidating to go or to say a few words here before the Honorable Senator Whitmire, but I'll do my best. I'm glad that I was here early enough also to hear some of the comments and remarks made by some of the other speakers. My jurisdiction is in Webb County, Laredo, Texas. It's a border town to the Republic of Mexico. I guess we brag about it being the largest or busiest inland port for commercial trade. But unfortunately, with that also comes one of the major corridors of drug trafficking in our country. And what we see a lot in our community is that a lot of those drugs linger. And so it ends up in our schools. I've been on the bench 10 years, and as Mark mentioned, we started a program called Let's All Rise to the Challenge. We go to the school campuses. I hold actual court sentences there. We have 3 or 4 sentencings on drug cases, and we invite our drug court participants to speak to the students. And we go to the high schools and middle schools. But what shocked me, I guess about 4 or 5 years ago, was that one of our elementary school teachers, along with the principal, called to invite me to actually beg us to go to their school and concept of an actual court setting or proceeding. And the response was, well, unfortunately, she said, in our campus, we just had one 9-year-old third grader arrested for dealing drugs on campus. Not in possession, but dealing drugs on campus. So some of the comments I think Sheriff Garcia mentioned earlier, that we need to address the demand, and he was talking about prostitution, of course, but you all know prostitution. A lot of it, unfortunately, the prostitution victims are addicted to drugs. But I agree with that concept in addressing the demand. We need to address the demand early, and that's why we're doing that in Laredo with our court school program. We're trying to educate our youth about the dangers and consequences of drugs by having them see firsthand the individuals that are sentenced and handcuffed and shackled, walking out their gymnasium or library and listening to their testimonials. And sometimes you have no idea what these defendants are going to say. I remember one defendant in particular wearing the classic black and white jumpsuit in the jail. 21 years old, I had to sentence him to 5 years for possession of cocaine. And he's telling the students that, I actually attended this school. We didn't set it up already before that. He was telling, I visited this campus a few years ago, this school campus. And he said, when I sat there like you are, I didn't know what the consequences were of getting handcuffed and shackled. He said, but here they are in black and white. And I thought that was pretty deep. And you can see the students very attentive. And he also mentioned to them that while he was in custody for 7 months, his girlfriend had given birth to his daughter who was 6 months old, and he said, I have not been able to hold my own daughter. Another consequence that he shared with the students. So, but now let me go talk a little bit more about my drug court, or our drug court. We started our drug court in 2009, and I was sharing with John, sitting next to me here, the way he asked me, how did I become interested in mental health or drug courts? And I was saying, when I took the bench in 2005, one of my fellow district judges, the Honorable Manuel Flores, was a little overwhelmed. We talked about we need more judges. Well, it depends. We could probably all work a little harder to get things done. But in this case, he was a little overwhelmed. Our docket was a small docket I just taken to the bench. So I went ahead and accepted a transfer of about 400 cases, all drug cases, felony drug cases. And what I started seeing and noticing was this revolving door. The sentencing people to county time and state jail time, and then you start seeing them again, time after time short, they're back in your court, and in some cases, there are individuals who have died of drug overdoses waiting for their case. And I was fortunate enough to meet and to be inspired by the retired judge, John Cruzo. I think he is one of the most passionate judges and most strongest proponents of drug courts. And he inspired me, motivated me to come back to Laredo and start our drug court program. And now we have our sobriety treatment program. We address the alcohol dependent participants, and we started our veteran treatment program a year ago. And I can proudly say that our success rate is high. As far as recidivism, for our graduates, for reoffending, our success rate is at 75%. Only about 25% or less actually have reoffended. Now, the participants who are in our program, obviously we can monitor them for drug use as well, like reoffending. And the drug use, well, it varies, of course, but the reoffending, recidivism rate is, for the active participants, and sometimes they respond, is under 20%. So, drug court works. I guess that's what I'm here to say. We started implementing our medication assistance treatment for our veterans treatment program with our Vivitrol. I'm sure a lot of you know what Vivitrol, the injection form of naltrexone. And what we found is that those individuals who have started using Vivitrol and are participating in this program because of their mental health issues are more attentive at the individual sessions and group sessions, more receptive to treatment, and as a result, employment rate has gone higher. There is less criminal activity committed by them. And as I mentioned, we just started our veteran treatment program, and as of today, none of our veterans have reoffended. We have 35 veterans. And our program, our veteran treatment program, also has 2 licensed professional counselors who are also veterans. One of them is a female combat veteran. And and they have first-hand knowledge of the issues, and I think that's worked very well for our program. So I guess I'll leave with this note. I was asked also what I did before, what my aspirations were before becoming a lawyer. And I actually wanted to join the Drug Enforcement Administration because my father and my uncle are all in law enforcement. And my thoughts at the time were, before law school, I want to join the fight on the war on drugs. Again, I talked about my hometown and all the things that go on there, and I saw that growing up. What I've come to learn is that there's a better way to fight the drug wars, the war on drugs, I'm sorry. And that's by fighting one addiction at a time. Every day, in every way, and every place. So I think if we all do our part, we can win this war. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Well, hopefully we can do an event in Laredo soon as well. Well, I have great pleasure of introducing a man who I think deserves more credit than anyone else for the tremendous reforms we've seen in Texas, which he's been working to advance over decades. And then when I started in 2005, I was able to kind of, as was Chairman Madden, when he became Chair of the Corrections Committee, kind of join hands with Senator Whitmire. And really, I think the results have speak for themselves as we've seen the crime and incarceration rates in Texas decline. I think, as you all know, he's served 10 years in the Texas House of Representatives before becoming a state senator. He's been chair of the Senate Criminal Justice Committee, where he's shepherded through really some major reforms, and really has also had a tremendous impact on the budget, which has been critical to sustaining our diversion programs, treatment, probation, and parole supervision. So we are indebted to him, and we are though expecting even more greater things from him in the coming session. Please join me in welcoming Chairman John Whitmire.
Thank you, Mark. And Judge Hale, thank you for your leadership and the fine work you're doing in your community, which just demonstrates the success stories, and we need more of it. Obviously, that's why we're here today. I want to thank each of you for being here and the opportunity to speak to you. When I got to the hotel, I was informed that there's another luncheon going on right now, the Public Policy Council donors. So I told Arlene, if she had the donors in here, they'd be writing checks to hear about our successes and our challenges. She said, no, they'd be writing checks to you, so problems. I don't know what the hell's wrong with that policy either. But obviously, I got to work with these and the folks that are making a difference on a daily basis. And I can't think of a better summit topic than pretrial and mental health solutions. You've had an outstanding lineup. And I'm going to walk you kind of through where we've been, where we are, and where we need to go. But if you don't remember anything else I say today, you've heard a lot today, you've heard a lot from the practitioners that can make such a difference, and most of them are making a difference. But if you don't remember anything else, as participants, as you go back to your fields, is that criminal justice is a system. Hear me out for a minute. I deal with all facets of the criminal justice system on a daily basis. I am the police officer spokesman in Austin. I have a great working relation with the district attorneys. I work with correction officers and administrators every day, and I could go through the list. What we have to emphasize and learn and recognize that whatever you do at this end, arresting a police officer, impacts the correction system. What the parole officers do impact recidivism, which impacts the prison population. How the district attorney decides to prosecute impacts the correction facilities. What probation does, conditions of probation, will impact the revocations and what we as a system has to do in terms of incarceration or substance abuse treatment. I just can't emphasize enough. We've learned a lot in recent years that mark that it is a system, but we still have individuals, local sheriffs, local organizations and associations that say the hell with the rest of the system. My job is to arrest people. And I'm going to go after trace cocaine even if when they get to court, there's not even enough to test. Please, arresting officer and your union, my dear friends, recognize that's only taking your officers off the street. That's only overcrowding your jail and ultimately compounding our problems at our correction facilities. So, if you don't remember anything else, leave here recognizing that we're all in this together from the very early arrest, and I could actually go down to the school systems and say how you deal with school discipline and how you profile youngsters in school impacts our criminal justice system. And certainly the reentry system that we don't have much of would impact whether the parolees are successful. So we're in a system, and I want to emphasize that, but then let's quickly drill down on some where we've been, where we are, and where we need to go, and I'll try to stay within my time. First of all, the first time I went to the House in 1973 as a young state rep. The prison system was a small rural system, very small. And in 1981, the first time I ever really heard the issue of prisons and what we're going to do about either overcrowding or undercrowding was Bill Clements in 1981, the first Republican in 150 years, vetoed 10,000 prison beds in 1981. That's where we were. He said, we don't need to spend that. He was obviously a businessman. So we vetoed 10,000 prison beds, and that kind of got our attention. We did fine in the 80s, and then about 1983, our criminal justice system was completely broken, as most in the nation were. Crack cocaine largely was driving the overpopulation of the criminal justice system. We were not prepared for it. In 93, I had already been in the Senate 10 years, was chairing intergovernmental affairs, which is county and city governments. And our chairman of criminal justice, Ted Lyons, was lost. Bob Bullock called me in his office, very tough lieutenant governor, and said, I want you to chair criminal justice. I said, no. I thought the fish was on to end my career that session. It was a revolving door. You were serving 1 month for every year that you were sentenced. Life sentences were less than 10 years. It was totally dysfunctional. No classification. No distinguishment between violent and non-violent offenders. You let out a rapist to put in a car thief. 60,000 inmates were in our criminal justice, our prison system, with 30,000 backed up in the county jails because nowhere to place them. They were actually paroled without ever leaving the county jail. It was a total mess. I didn't want to do it. I'd never been on the committee. I was not a criminal attorney. But after thinking about it over the weekend, Bullock asked me on Monday morning, I said, let's go. You don't tell your boss no, or you'll never get another opportunity. So what I did was, recognizing my limitations, I surrounded myself with the likes of Tony Fabello, Lawrence Coben was a chief probation officer in Harris County, judges, crime victims association, prosecutors. We started in January. Let me tell you another complication. We had sunsetted the penal code the year before. So we had to also rewrite the penal code. And it came out a very tough penal code, probably the one that we're still working under, that is probably one of the toughest in the nation. You don't have to wait for 3 strikes in Texas. You commit a violent offense, and we know what we're going to do with you. Our commitment was never to have a lack of space where if we sentenced someone, we didn't know what we were going to do with them. So in 93, we went into a huge expansion. The first thing we decided was to classify people. That's the concept of state jails. Mark, I don't know what you were doing in 1993, but I was coming up, along with others, the concept of state jails. Heavy on treatment. As a condition of probation, you go to a state jail. So we got started. We went into hard beds as well. But here comes Governor Bush. We had instituted a lot of treatment as the state jail concept called for. Governor Bush said, hey, what's the issue here? I quit drinking on my own. He had a tough wife that read him the write-up. After an all-nighter, she said, it's in his book, either quit drinking or you and I are going to have serious problems. Governor George W. quit drinking on his own. Unfortunately, you and I know that's not the best model for the people that we deal with. They have no family. They have no resources. They did not have a support system. But we did cut back in our treatment and actually kept some to about 2003 when we had budget cuts, and we pretty much reduced all. And in fact, unfortunately, state jails are not being operated the way they were designed when we started in 93. But 03, we even took further cuts. 05, blessing comes forward in the form of Jerry Madden. Jerry Madden I had met once in Chicago at a legislative conference, sat next to him. He's an engineer, was kind of my opinion of him, and a good, solid Republican. He became the chair of criminal justice in our house. He came over, he and I met, we talked. He's analytical enough, he's smart enough, he's got a conscience. He said, we can do better. People have asked me, how did you pull off so much treatment in 07? You've been talking about it for 10, 13 years. I said, well, first of all, I got Jerry Madden as a partner in the house. The talk's there. He's very effective. And number two, I have said this enough times, you say it enough times, and finally they start believing that there is a better model than locking up everyone that comes before a judge. Judge Gist from Beaumont, who's actually on the criminal justice, the prison TDCJ board, taught me in the 90s, John, the easiest thing a judge can do is send someone to prison. It's a no-brainer. You can clear your docket. You don't see them again. He says it takes 07, we're having, because of our cuts and lack of programming, we're having a backlog again. We're out of prison space. I sat on fire. You did not understand. He was always confusing pro and probation. He would interchange those words. He's a Naval Academy graduate, nuclear physicist, submarine commander. And one day after a committee hearing, I said, Steve, in talking about the funding of the program, I said, you've got to learn the difference in probation and parole. He said, Whitmire, you're not going to get your funding calling me stupid. I said, well, learn the damn difference. With a lot of hard work, Dewhurst and the leadership wanted 3 new prisons. I spoke in finance, we can't operate the ones we have. We're 3,000 correction officers short. Treatment works. Trust me, I can demonstrate it where it has been used and it works. Judge Hill. He said, okay. They were going to spend hundreds of millions of dollars on 3 new prisons because the leadership thinks it sounds tough, good politics. But instead, working with Jerry in the house, we created 6,000 treatment beds. I'm going to still say publicly, that's Whitmire's other blood program. There's nothing soft on the crime to making someone get off drugs, get their life together, support their family, and become a taxpayer. Quite frankly, sometimes that's tougher than just incarcerating them.
That's true.
So there was nothing hug or thug about it, but if he wanted to designate it my hug or thug program, let's go for it because it works. We created several thousand beds on the front end, substance abuse treatment facilities. As a condition of probation, you go to Central Unit at Sugar Land, spend 6 months at the time in counseling, treatment. Recidivism rates lowered with that population. We put additional beds inside the prisons. That's worked. They didn't have any at the time. And here's what has really worked. Intermediate sanction facilities. Feeding the prison population was parolees who have a bad day, like you and I do. In the past, if they had a bad day, did not show up, got in a dispute with their partner, and the police was called, no conviction, but just the fact that you had a dispute and the police showed up, you were revoked and sent back and started your prison sentence again. Now, unless you commit a new crime, but if you're not following our rules, which we're very serious about as a condition of parole, you go to a 400-bed facility across the street from Minute Maid Park. Most people don't even know it's there. For up to 90 days for an opportunity to have another chance to get your life together. They don't go to work. There's no manufacturing there, but they're in counseling and getting a chance to cool off and realize that we're serious about that you show up, that you don't test positive for alcohol or drugs, and you don't get in a dispute with people that you're living with. That's working well, and it's lower recidivism. Now here's one more that I'm most proud about. I've always been concerned about the DWI offenders that are sent to prison. We know that drinking and driving will kill you just like if you use a gun. But if you're not drinking, you're not a danger. Remember, y'all spent some time this morning talking about who we're afraid of versus who we're mad at. We ought to incarcerate for serious time those that we're afraid of. Child molester, rapist, murder, I have no sympathy. Lock them up for very serious time. But in order to do that and have the resources, you can't waste them on the people that you're just mad at. And a person convicted of a DWI where they're not drinking, we're not afraid of. But many are alcoholics. Most are alcoholics because you go to prison after the third conviction. I think people can make a mistake the first time, and if you get your life together and learn not to drink and drive, get a designated driver, use Uber, whatever your choice is, you ought to be able to learn from your one mistake that all of us are, if you drink, are subject to. But the third one, you got a serious drinking problem. We have this morning about 5,500 people incarcerated across the state for their third or more DWI. In 2007, they were going in and out with no treatment. We created a location in Henderson. I had to compromise again to my rural members to put it there so they can get the jobs. But this morning, there's 500 DWI offenders not going to the field, not going to manufacturing. They're learning to cope with their drinking issue. And it's working well. And to TDCJ's credit, in this proposed budget, this starting in January, they want another facility like that. But here where I'm going to talk a little bit where we need to focus is, last year still, Mothers Against Drunk Drivers, who always want more and more punishment and blocking devices. I want somebody to talk about fixing people's problems. Last year we released 4,000 people from TDCJ who had been sent there for their DWI convictions, and they didn't receive one day of treatment in our prisons. That's unconscionable. It in itself ought to be against the law. How do you lock someone up for drinking and driving, posing a danger to our communities, but you lock them up and you let them out after 3, 4, and 5 years without one day of treatment? Wow. We have work to do. But to make a long story short, in the 2007 experience, working with Jerry, working with the leadership in the Senate and the House, we have become the model of the nation. In March 11, the Public Policy Council became our partners. It was great to have a think tank of their credibility to talk. Sometimes Mark talks so long in my committee, I have to kind of give some time restraints on him. But that's okay, because I know where his heart and mind is. He's representing a very important community. Now, as well as we've done, we find ourselves in 2014 now with a lot of unfinished business. And while we're here today, we're still incarcerating too many people. There's probably over at the Harris County Jail anywhere from 1,000 to 1,500 misdemeanor folks jailed, haven't been to court yet because they can't afford a bond. If they were in Dallas, San Antonio, Austin, they could do a PR bond if they met the profile of a job, a family, a house, some predictability that they're not flight risk, and they're over there because they can't post bond. That is wrong. It's overcrowding the Harris County Jail. They're losing their jobs. If they get arrested over the weekend for driving with a suspended license, a misdemeanor, they're taken to jail. They need to be back on the job on Monday morning, supporting their family. We need to fix that. We're still incarcerating people that are not a danger to society. They make us mad. I don't know where I was in the building working on something else a few years ago when they made prostitution a felony. Highland Park was the lead sponsor, and John Corona carried it because Highland Park just didn't want those prostitutes on their corners. I understand that. I understand that. But I also know that they're not who I'm afraid of. I'm angry and mad at their lifestyle. Yeah. This morning we probably have a little over 300 prostitutes locked up in our maximum security prison for women in Gatesville, Texas. Dallas has a successful prostitution court. Carpus has a good one, and I carried a bill that counties over 250,000 must create a prostitution court, because as we've learned from drug courts and DWI courts and mental health courts and military courts now, specialty courts work where the judge and the resources and the counselors see the same type profile and learn what resources to use. We can't continue to waste prison space, and I appeal to my fiscal conservative Republicans. If you don't do it for the right reason, because it's the human thing to do it to save money. We must keep these ladies in the community, in a program, diversion program, and of course they need a reentry program, because I have spoken to Kathy Griffin's clientele, gone and heard her work and counseled her. The real challenge is, if you want to change that lifestyle, where do you go live? You know, that's what I'm talking about earlier. We're in a system. Mr. Police Officer, Miss Police Officer, Judge, DA, you got to understand how you affect this prostitute to front end. If we don't do better, I've got to make certain that we have prison space, which I'm very opposed to. Let's keep them in the community. And then you got to have a successful reentry program. Now let me close by telling you something that let me speak about the women in prison first, though. I looked at my notes. Prostitution is just one component. We've got 12,000 women locked up in Gainesville this morning. Nearly every one of them are nonviolent. You've got a few violent that have done some dangerous things. But most are nonviolent, drug abuse, alcohol abuse, which led to not only prostitution, but fraudulent prescriptions, etc. We got to work on that population, because most of them are not a threat to society. When they go to prison, they might not be the best law-abiding citizens, but most of them are good mothers. And when you lock up a man in prison, it has a profound impact. But oftentimes, the women we lock up were the only sole provider for that family. Most of those women could be worked with, whether it be in the mental health court, the DWI court, the prostitution court. Do you know how many babies we had born in prison last year? 198 babies were born in prison last year. People say, how did that happen? Well, they were pregnant when they came through the system. I know some judges who actually told me, yeah, I sent her to prison because that's the only place she's going to get any prenatal care. Now, I appreciate your thought, Judge, but I would much rather put her in a diversion program and keep her in the community. One of the things I'm most proud of is it's a Bambi program, is what they call it. A few years ago, I was at a female prison, and I was talking to one of the inmates. I try to learn each time I go. And this one lady just would not make eye contact with me. And she kept crying. And I asked her, I said, can I ask you why you're crying? I'm here to help. I want to learn from you. She said, okay, first let me put a time frame in this. This was in the mid-90s, when I was still learning, and I still learn every time. But in the mid-90s, it was about 96, became good friends with Susan Cranford, who's now passed. She was a long-time trailblazer, female warden in the system. And she would always line up about 5 or 6 inmates for me to visit with. So this lady, and I said, where are you from? DeKalb, Texas. It's near Texarkana, about 200 people. But she wouldn't quit crying. And so when we got through, I said, can I ask you why you crying? I'm here to learn and help. She said, because they took my baby away from me 2 weeks ago. And I was so green at that time, chairing this committee. I said, what do you mean they took your baby away? She said, well, that's what they do. I said, why are you here? 5th DWI. Shouldn't have been in prison in the first place. But she's from a little community with no resources. But someone, her family, the authorities should have just said, you're not going to leave your house. You know what I mean? Just make certain she doesn't leave the house and drink again. She's obviously a very serious alcoholic. But she was pregnant when she went to prison. In those days, now they have in League City, they have facilities for pregnant women that they take about 6 weeks before their due date today. But back in those days, they wait literally to about the time the woman went in labor and head for John Seeley in Galveston, which is the prison hospital. But in those days, and still in some cases, you would have a baby on Friday, you get the nurse, see the baby. On Saturday morning, they would take the baby away and either place it in adoption if you had no family, or let it leave with the family. So I was committed from that conversation on, we can do better. And there's other areas that I could cite that we can do better. We got to really work on those prison officials on a regular basis. Now, in Northeast Houston, they've got 20 mothers out there this morning. If you're not a child molester, of course, depending on the nature of your crime, you got to only got 2 years left, because the issue is, if you bond with your child and the child gets too old, 2 or 3, what are you going to do? So there's still some complications. But the good news is there's 20 women in Northeast Houston in a confined apartment, TDCJ confinees, that now get to keep their baby.
Yeah.
That's the kind of smart on crime, Mark, that all of us are very committed to. Now let me close with something I want to tear about, that I need your help. Criminalizing school behavior.
Yeah.
There is no question that they over-ticket, over-police, they ticket the youth, the student, and the parents for truancy. I had a bill last session with Royce West. We have significantly reduced the number of ticketing for things like being out of your seat, throwing an eraser, cursing, all the things that I would have been written up for. Now you have to have a complainant. You have to have a teacher or administrator, and it's got to be for a violation of the penal code. Which, you know, is significantly reducing the ticketing for that issue. But still, we're ticketing for truancy. There is no reason, in my judgment, that ticketing a $500 ticket to the student and the parent ever solves the root cause of students not going to school. You got to be there to learn. But I have documented a case where an undocumented mother with an 8-year-old over near my office in the Heights asked for help because she got a ticket because Richard didn't go to school for a week. No one went out to see that her old worn-out vehicle, transmission had quit. She has no family, no one to ask for help, and she needed $1,400 to fix her car to get Richard back in school. Our school administrators have to learn what it's like in the real world. And grown-up decisions have to be made that are sensitive to, for instance, an inner-city student, 14-year-old, was not going to school, and she got a ticket. When they did go, Houston Municipal Courts has a very limited manager program. They have 14 managers that work the junior highs. The problem is there's 30 junior highs. And they had a manager go to the home of a recent 14-year-old that got a ticket, and they found out that she was pregnant, and she had no maternity clothes. So she can't go to school. She's embarrassed. Why in the world would grown-ups like our school administrators and some legislators want to allow that to be a criminal justice issue? Expulsions, suspensions, we've worked on that for the last year. We're going to address it this year. There is no question that too many students are being suspended and expelled to the streets of their community. After studying it and being on a national panel, we have documented nothing good comes from out-of-school suspensions, with very rare exceptions. When you send a child home in the middle of the day to his or her community, no supervision, they connect with the gangs, they connect with troublemakers, and nothing comes from it. And let me impress upon you the other factor. Overrepresentation of the African American community in school suspensions. In Texas, the last data we have is for 2012. 84% of our African American males, hear me, in the state of Texas, public schools, 84% of African American males were suspended 1 or more times. And when I saw that, I said, hell, that's nearly everybody. Some were suspended more than 11 times. And I said, what did they not learn at the school that after 1, 2, or 3 suspensions that it wasn't working? Overrepresentation. You say, well, Senator Whitmire, tell us the rest of the story. The rest of the story is they get a profile, they get a case number, they are in the criminal justice system. You can go to the TYC, the Texas Youth Facilities, and talk to the young people there. Nearly every one of them system, we must do better starting at the school setting, because that's when we can detect the problems at a very early stage. And let me also emphasize another area before I guess answer questions. Mental health. Mental health. Mental health. We all know that the criminal justice system has become the mental health service provider for the state of Texas. Harris County Jail probably treats more mental health patients than anywhere in state or county government. Let me tell you how bad it is at the prison system. Last year, we documented our current population is 150,000 people incarcerated in TDCJ at 108 locations. Working with Jerry and the legislature, we've actually shut down 3 prisons in the last 4 years. Because of the treatment load, our population is not able to not only stabilize, it's actually dropping. But let me tell you about our population. 150,000, that's 1.5 Waco, Texas. Think about that next time you go through Waco. 1.5 Waco that we guard, feed, and clothe at 108 locations. We documented that 32,000 inmates last spring had been in a criminal justice program before they ever committed a crime. You got that picture? They were in a community mental health program, getting counseling and their drug treatment, but because of budget cuts in 2003, now we have no community mental health system. So 32,000 people were in a mental health program in their community, and they couldn't get counseling, they couldn't get their treatment drugs, and then they have a bad day. They're schizophrenic, bipolar. They go home, they assault a family member or a neighbor, they call law enforcement, they assault the police officer, and welcome to the criminal justice system. We must impress upon our state leadership and lawmakers that if you spend money at the front end on mental health, we could go a long way toward addressing our jail overcrowding, our prison conditions, and the cost. And it is a crying shame. And those are the 32,000 that we've identified. I promise you it's much larger if you consider the people that have never been diagnosed, not to mention those that are put in administrative segregation. If they don't have an emotional mental problem when they go in, I promise you, if you've ever drilled down on that issue, and we're working round the clock with prison officials to try to reduce that. They've gone down to about 6,000, but they still overuse that mechanism at nearly every prison. Let me close at this time. Remember what I said. I want you to remember, if nothing else, we're all in this together, and every step, every component of the criminal justice system has a downstream or upstream impact. And that's why sometimes law enforcement, and I had a good conversation with Dan Patrick yesterday, because some of the law enforcement groups in the state want to make the first-time burglary of a vehicle a felony. And I understand my car's been broken into. It's an aggravation. It really makes you angry. First of all, if you don't leave something in it, it won't happen. That's the first preventive measure. But I, unlike our law enforcement, have to worry about prioritizing our jail and prison space. Low-level drug offenders. My police officers just insist on trace cocaine or low-level marijuana use. Speaking of low-level marijuana, let me just tell you, because I'm doing my research on that. A few years ago, someone at a meeting like this said, well, what do you think about legalizing marijuana? Somebody at the Rotary Club would ask me. It was usually some 70-year-old man that fought in Vietnam. And he's missing his marijuana. Back a few years ago, that's a true story. A few years ago, they would ask me a question. I said, I don't have time to deal with that. I got a full plate, and it ain't going to happen. Now, I got to have a dialogue. Thanks to a number of states. Last year in the state of Texas, there were 73,000 people. You ready for this? That were arrested for 2 ounces or less of marijuana. 73,000. Think how many trips to the jail the cops took. And then 23,000 of them were on probation, misdemeanor probation. So I don't know the future of that issue, but it's going to be a dialogue. And where I come from is, I want to lock up the people that I'm afraid of. I don't want to mess with those that I'm mad at. So we just have to continue, Mark. Somebody said, well, Mark, you should have copyrighted it in '93. get smart on crime. Being tough. Everyone in this room, everyone that I've talked to in the legislature is tough on crime. Because we don't want to be held up. I've been robbed at gunpoint, begged for my life. I don't want anyone else to go through that experience. The guy that robbed me spent 12 years in the Abilene prison. I understand he's doing well and he's out now. But the bottom line is, we've just got to continue to be smart. It saves money, it saves lives, and we can do a lot better. And let me rest at this point and see if anyone's got a question. Can't imagine, because it sounds like me. You can tell I enjoy talking about the subject, but let me rest for a moment and see if someone's got a question about this session or something that I've either missed or confused. Yes, sir. Hold on. In fact, I'm going to have to run out of here and go to the DA's office, and not on the grand jury issue, but it is very much a topic. I've introduced Senate Bill 135, which calls for all jurisdictions to go to a random selection for grand juries. Some of my police buddies yesterday called and said, well, we like the way it is. I said, well, we're going to have to disagree on this. But I don't know how any objective person can look at either the national scene, but let's just go local, and see that we lack diversity. There's a perception that it's a good old boy network, and we've got to address that. The odds of my bill passing are guardedly good, but there are people, District Attorney Association and others, like it. We have to at least have a grown-up discussion about modifying it. My bill that I am strongly in support of, and I talked to Denise Collins yesterday, Judge Collins says, I said, how do you select yours? She says, I go to the civil jury pool and get me some jurors. It can be done. There is a concern about if you get folks who can't afford to serve on a grand jury, that becomes an issue. So maybe we need to compensate them better. Yeah. Maybe the DAs need to not have 2 meetings a week. We just need to discuss it, because I think any reasonable person can look at it and see that it's flawed. Judges tell me that, prosecutors tell me that. Devin Anderson says if she was going back to be a judge, she would use a random selection. You just can't keep using the same grand jurors repeatedly. And for someone to use a grand juror that's either has a police officer foreman or even sits on there to send a police action case to that grand juror is using really, really poor judgment. So I need your help. We need to get, remember I said it's a system? I want everybody up and down the criminal justice system to recognize if you have a flawed grand jury who goes to court in the first place, it's not going to work. We have a damaged criminal justice system. Yeah. Certainly not one that can't be improved. Thank you for that question. Yes? Anyone else? Sure.
I'm interested in repealing the enhanced PI statutes. So, public intoxication. As we've started setting up sobriety centers in the neighborhood communities, jailing people for public intoxication in jail is not real helpful. It's really expensive.
Sure.
And it was, it hasn't been that long ago that, I think it was 98 or 99 that statute passed. I think we ought to look at doing something like some of the other states do, where police have a right to take someone into protective custody and take them to a treatment facility. But I don't think folks that are only getting arrested for PI need to be going to jail.
Well, I totally agree with you, unless they're, tied to a complete dangerous fool. And then there's other charges you could come back to. But just being publicly drunk, it's just another opportunity to be smart on crime. We got the detox center here that I understand is working pretty well. You know what would really help in Houston, and it's not particular to the detox issue, but in general. Houston just does not have a homeless shelter of any significance. You go to Dallas, you go to D.C., Boston's got a significant. We really need a shelter for folks who have nowhere to go, because a lot of those folks do end up in the criminal justice system. But the detox, you know, here, the whole concept of DWIs, and I've tried my best to have working groups on there. It is an amazing, the spread, the difference of how each community handles it within the same state of Texas. The district attorney in Bexar County for several years, she just got defeated that day in a tough race, but she's a hang-em-high DA. She has allowed people to plead guilty to obstruction of a highway so they don't get a DWI. You know, we've had a diversion program that was working real well just a couple of years ago in Harris County. You know, that is a population, and my friends in Mothers Against Drunk Drivers have done a magnificent job historically. But when they come by my office, I don't give them a lot of time because I'm aggravated at them, because all they want to do is enhance the penalties. And then they're in my judgment, too close to Smart Start or whatever that deal is they make. You know, 80% of DWI offenders never reoffend. It's people that are out at a party, in a social gathering, and get pulled over, and they learn from it and never do it again. But then we've got these special interest groups, Smart Start or whatever the hell it's called, teams up with MAD. MAD won't tell me how much they donate to them. But the bottom line is we don't need to make everybody be treated like they're fixing to drink again. You need to look at, you know, repeat offenders, et cetera, et cetera. But the whole DWI topic, you know, we got UT students. I had a police officer, a friend of mine, call. Last session, his daughter, 21-year-old senior at UT, going down Riverside late at night, hit a wall at her apartment. Single car accident. She's not hurt. She got a DWI on her record the rest of her life. Jobs that require driving, I think even a lot of school teacher positions, most jobs will not allow her to ever apply. We, as smart stakeholders and smart leaders, need to figure out a way that you can do it once and screw up. You know, you don't kill somebody. Obviously, manslaughter and all the danger and injuries would be a factor. But if someone can, you know, in my career, what is now against the law is a DWI, a 9 or 10 was actually legal. So, you know, I just think the whole topic of DWI needs a very grown-up, responsible discussion. We need to be firm with those that insist on drinking and driving, confine them, give them the treatment that I discussed, and then hold them accountable going forward. But we also need to understand that the public intoxication, I have staff here at Lawrence's. I'd like to look at that enhancement. I'll be honest with you, I'm not that familiar with it. But Houston has provided some leadership to take them straight over to the detox center, and I understand it's working pretty good. Anything else? Okay, it ought to be a wild session. They're all wild, but we got 9 freshman senators, new lieutenant governor, new governor. The good news is, some of the new freshmen that call themselves Tea Party and have campaigned against more government. Of course, I got to ignore when they want to get after my gay friends and they want to get after the immigrants. I want to get, you know, anybody that doesn't look or practice their lifestyle, they're going to get after me. And I'm going to be there to knock heads with them. I don't think we need to all have open carry pistols. That's a little ridiculous. But you got to work with who you can get the results with. The good news is they don't want more government, which means they don't want more people incarcerated. So there is an opportunity to work with the new freshmen that are coming in that just don't hardly trust government. They think somebody like me that's been in it 42 years is part of the problem. But we got to take advantage of their listening to, we don't want to be wasteful, and we want to deal with who we're afraid of, and handle those that we're mad at in a different fashion. Thank y'all. Thank the Public Policy Council. Jerry Madden, thank you. I can go through the list of people here. Ms. May with probation. I could go on. We've got a lot of work, a lot of things we're doing good. The nation is beginning to see that there's better ways to handle people that you're mad at. And thank you for allowing me to get up here. And now I got to go try to see who those damn donors are. Because, you know,
get you a speaking invite to the Tea Party. Well, thank y'all for being here, and this is the first event we've done outside of Austin on criminal justice, so it's really amazing to see this level of interest, and I think a lot of great ideas came forward today, and true spirit of collaboration across so many aspects of the criminal justice system. We did record this, so I also believe Raging Elephants Radio, which is kind of a Tea Party radio channel, so if that's okay with you, Chairman, they're going to broadcast it as well. And so we will have it up on our website, and so if you missed any part of it, please check that out. And please just get any ideas you have, though, for things that we could work with lawmakers in Austin this session on. Please feel free to talk to me and my colleagues. We want to make sure our work in Austin is informed by those who are on the front lines every day. So thanks again, and y'all have a great afternoon.
Walking around do they hire you?